So I'm gonna talk about the non-workshop here in the last instance. Okay, this is where we are. In case you didn't realize, what would it look like? And keep this in mind. There's an important thing I haven't brought up yet for some of you who weren't here the other day. Is that non-philosophy for Laruelle is a new genre of thinking. So it's not a science in a strict sense, but it's more akin to science fiction. It's kind of important, so I'm glad I remembered to bring that up. But the same way philosophy and theory, as we know, it has a certain relationship to science fiction. For Laruelle, his thought and non-philosophy is performative fictional practice in the last instance, what he calls a philo-fiction. Or later, as you'll see in a couple weeks, if you show up for his lectures, a photo-fiction. So what's a non-workshop? Why do we call it that? Well, let's try to do a non-philosophical reading here. Let's use some philosophies as material. And we've already started to use Laruelle himself as a material of philosophy. So why would this be a non-workshop? Well, let's look here at what he's trying to do. So he's trying to defend the human in the last instance. And the question he asks, is the human even worth defending? And at the same time, he's saying, well, we can't really quite describe what the human is. It's always in the last instance, and it's always, for him, an equation that is transcendental subject equals X. And the X is always present. So what is a non-workshop? Well, it would be a workshop that wouldn't be about work. That's for sure. But let's lose some materials here, because materials of philosophy are what you have to use if you're going to try to do a non-philosophical performance. And it's always about, again, defending the human in the last instance. Now, what is the human? So I thought about this, and I decided to turn my cell phone off. And I thought, well, what is the human? What is the human and the humane and the human here? How could we try to look at it? And I thought of Spinoza and a guy named Franco Bifo Berardi. He wrote a book called The Soul at Work. Okay? So, if we try to think here about what a non-workshop would be, it would have to be something that would undermine what work was and what a workshop was. And as we continue today to work more and more through a digital apparatus, most of us, it becomes much more difficult to know when we're at work and when we're not at work. And Berardi gets to this, and it reminded me of, to a certain degree, of Spinoza, too, who is also a thinker of eminence, which he says, you know, things aren't good or bad, it's about proportions. So, anyway, I'm going to try to get to the part here that I think is the most interesting here, because I can ramble for a while. But we're going to use here the equation for this subject equals X in the last instance. It will be non-work then that we're going to try to figure out if we can maybe think about it. And what is a non-workshop? So it wouldn't be about work. But what would it be about then? It would be about defending the human in the last instance. And what would the human in the last instance be in this case? So I'm going to quote Berardi here as a material to ask this question and think about, again, what a non-workshop would be. And for Berardi, he says, we can reach every point in the world, talking about mobility today with technology. We can reach every point in the world, but more importantly, we can be reached from any point in the world. Privacy and its possibilities are abolished. Attention is under siege everywhere. Not silence, but uninterrupted noise. Not the red desert, but a cognitive space overcharged with nervous incentives to act. This is the alienation of our times. Capital has managed to overcome the dualism of the body and the soul by establishing a workforce in which everything we mean by the soul, and I think this we can compare to what Laruelle is trying to get at with the human and the humane and the human, or the man in the last instance. But everything that we mean by the soul, language, creativity, affects, is mobilized for its own benefit, the benefit of capital. Industrial production put to work bodies, muscles, and arms, the prior industry, the industrial industry. Now, in the sphere of digital technology and cyberculture, exploitation involves the mind, language, emotions in order to generate value, while our bodies disappear in front of our computer screens. So already we can see here Berardi's view of mobile technology as a technological body, and it's a relation to human bodies. And for Burardi then, in the old form of alienation from work that Marx talked about, there was still the possibility for workers doing a sort of humdrum, assembly line sort of job to still have the ability to have soul, or what he calls ways to communicate, talk about their daily lives, interact, think. And he says, so in a way, that alienation of the body still allowed a place for us to think and to cultivate community. And for Burardi today, he says, this is precisely what we don't get a chance to do. Today, even the soul gets put to work, i.e., our emotional states, the way we communicate. Where does it take place mostly today? Through digital devices, where even if an app is for free, it's because they want to advertise to you. And the more you use Facebook and communicate, and it's a heck of an emotional sphere, I know from my own use, it's your soul that gets put to work, or your emotional exchanges. So even when you think you're not working, you're working for something. So I think for Burardi, this idea of putting the soul at work is perhaps precisely an attack on the human, what he calls the soul in a very loose way. And so I think if we look at Burardi here as a material, understanding what he thinks is a concern, and you can read his book and get into what he gets at a great depth. His concern is that the body and the mind, or the soul, namely every part of the human, is getting used by what now he calls semiocapitalism. So even a Facebook update, would you like to promote this Facebook update and pay an extra $1 to let people see it before something else? And for him, this is precisely one of the questions we have. Is it possible to have a non-workshop? Am I at work right now? Behind you are books. So, what then would be this human in the last instance here? The man in man. Because again, right now I'm reflecting, I'm doing philosophy. Am I doing non-philosophy here? Well, how would I mutate what I'm doing here to bring out and flesh out what a non-workshop is? And so the question as well, when you look at Burardi here as material and Laruelle, well, what is the human here that we maybe are trying to preserve? And I would say, what is the one thing that semiocapitalism, or our daily uses of technologies that are great, I'm not condemning these by any means, what do they do most effectively? They capture our attention. They take our attention away. Our capacity to sit while somebody rambles for a little bit and look at them and think and not look at your phone or wonder what am I going to do later, or I wonder, I check my email, because we all know that, at least most of us, that our relationship to work has shifted. Your day might be done until that email comes in, and then bam, you're right back at work. Or you thought your day was done and things were good, and then and you're talking to your friends, and then boom, you get a text message and such says this, and it's like, oh, it's a crisis, and you have to be there, and then you're back at work for somebody else. Are you working for your friend? Are you working for AT&T? Are you working for Facebook? You don't know. But at the end of the day, I think what is interesting, at least in this attempt tonight, for what I'm trying to perform as a fictional practice here, is to give back attention and to think about what attention is. Because I believe, and I know from my own experience, that my attention becomes perhaps one of the one things about the human that we perhaps take for granted the most today. So I thank you for listening to me. This, understand, was a diagram. This was a theoretical sketch, and it was a miming of what perhaps a philosophical or a non-philosophical attempt at what a non-workshop would be. So as I leave here, and we can ask questions and talk and mingle, and I'm going to have a glass of wine, what I wanted to do was not try to tell you what non-philosophy is, because it would fall into philosophy, but try to perform a diagram or sketch so when you go back and read the text, which, by the way, Laruelle will say, when people ask him for examples of a non-philosophical life, a non-philosophical technique, he'll say, read my books. For Laruelle, his theoretical fictional practice is his sort of gift, and it's maybe perhaps a protractor that you didn't know was a protractor, okay? And I have, if you like, if you still have the attention span to sit for a second, I'd be happy, because I asked him we've been in an epistolary exchange. He knows we're here right now. And he got nervous because he thought he had to be here right now. And I said, no, you have to be here next month. And he said, well, I want to answer their questions. And this is also a question of attention between the email digital ether. And I said, well, are you going to Skype? Do you want to stay up till 2 in the morning? And we can do that if you want, but I don't think you want to do that. What, Skype? No, I don't want to. I'm not going to Skype. I said, no, you don't have to be here. I'm supposed to give this lecture about your work, but I'm going to try to do it this way. Okay, good. Okay, I know what I got to do now.